JANA Duggar Emotional Journey, Finding Freedom. It began with a silence that was louder than any storm, a silence that carried with it the weight of years, of expectations, of a life lived under the constant shadow of control and public scrutiny. JANA Duggar, the woman once known as the quiet, dutiful daughter of a family that became America's most scrutinized household, has stepped into a chapter of her life that no one, not even she herself, could have fully predicted. Her journey into marriage with Stephen, her unexpected pregnancy, and her decision to seek refuge once again in her father Jim Bob's home reveal a story so layered, so fraught with emotion and contradiction, that it feels less like a simple news item and more like a reckoning. For years, fans, critics, and casual observers alike have watched JANA as she played the role of the Cinderella Duggar, the one who stayed behind while her sisters married, moved out, and began families of their own. But behind the carefully staged smiles and the curated images, the truth was far more complex. JANA's path was not one of freedom, but one of subtle entrapment, emotional manipulation, and an ongoing battle between obedience and independence. The marriage to Stephen was supposed to be her escape, her doorway to autonomy. Instead, it became a mirror reflecting everything she had tried so hard to escape. The story of JANA and Stephen began with whispers, with long conversations framed as destiny, as faith, as a divinely orchestrated union. To those around her, Stephen was presented as the man who could finally give JANA the life she deserved. Yet, beneath the veneer of charm and devotion, there were cracks visible even before the vows were exchanged. Friends close to the couple spoke of subtle but unmistakable patterns. Stephen's controlling questions about JANA's friendships, his criticism disguised as concern, his insistence on decision-making that left little room for her own voice. These were not glaring red flags, but rather the kind of quiet signals that become deafening once one looks back with clarity. When JANA married Stephen, many in the family celebrated, while others harbored quiet unease. For Jim Bob and Michelle, it was both a relief and a triumph, the last daughter of marriageable age finally moving forward, finally fitting the narrative of the family's public image. But for JANA, the wedding marked not liberation, but the beginning of another cycle of restraint. The early days of the marriage carried with them the usual facade of joy. Photos were shared, statements of happiness circulated, and the image of unity was projected outward. But those who paid close attention noticed the subtle details. JANA's smile, slightly forced. Her posture, less free than before. The way Stephen seemed to speak for both of them in public settings, leaving her with little more than a nod or a gentle smile. Observers began to question, quietly at first, whether JANA had truly found the partnership she deserved or whether she had simply traded one form of control for another. Then came the revelation of her pregnancy. For the world, it was a moment of celebration. For the Duggar family, it was proof that JANA was finally following the script they had long written for her. But for JANA herself, the pregnancy became a turning point, a catalyst that forced her to confront not only her reality, but the weight of the choices that had brought her there. Pregnancy is supposed to be a time of joy, of anticipation, of preparing for a new chapter of life. But in JANA's case, it magnified the cracks in her marriage. Stephen, far from offering support, reportedly used the pregnancy as another tool of control, dictating how she should behave, what decisions she should make, even how she should speak about their future child. Sources described moments of gaslighting, where JANA's concerns were dismissed as overreactions, where her desire for input was labeled as disobedience, where her instincts as a mother were questioned before she even held her child. It was betrayal in its most insidious form, not the betrayal of infidelity, but the betrayal of trust, of dignity, of partnership. In those moments, JANA was forced to realize that freedom could not be found simply in leaving her parents' house and marrying a man who promised love. Freedom, she discovered, required something deeper: the courage to confront manipulation, to call out hypocrisy, to refuse to be silenced. The timeline of this realization is marked by small but significant events. It began with her retreating into herself, her family noticing the dimming of her once bright presence. Then came the late-night phone calls to siblings, conversations where she cautiously expressed doubts she had never dared to speak aloud. Those who heard her words say she oscillated between guilt and clarity, between fear of disappointing her family and the growing certainty that she could not continue living under Stephen's shadow. The breaking point reportedly came in a private argument, one in which Stephen accused her of disloyalty simply for voicing her need for independence. The words exchanged in that moment cut deeper than any public scandal could, and JANA, faced with the stark reality of her life, made a choice that stunned even those closest to her. She packed her belongings and returned to her father's house. To outsiders, this may appear as a step backward, a grown woman, pregnant, retreating to the home she had once longed to escape. But in truth, it was both an act of desperation and of defiance. By leaving Stephen, JANA not only rejected his control, but also challenged the unspoken narrative that marriage alone equates to freedom. For the first time in years, she placed her own well-being above appearances, her own voice above the carefully orchestrated expectations of those around her. And yet, the irony is undeniable. In seeking freedom from her husband, she found herself once again under the roof of her father, Jim Bob, a man long criticized for his own use of control and manipulation. It is a paradox that cannot be ignored. The woman fighting for autonomy returning to the very environment that first denied it to her. Analysts looking at this story point to the psychological complexity of JANA's journey. It is not a simple tale of rebellion or escape. It is a layered exploration of how systems of control operate, first within a family, then within a marriage, and how breaking free from one often leads into the clutches of another. The Duggar family's image has always been built on ideals of obedience, unity, and moral authority. But JANA's choices expose the hypocrisy underlying that image. The gaslighting she endured, the subtle coercion, the constant policing of her actions, all of it mirrors the very dynamics that fans and critics have accused the family of practicing for years. JANA's story becomes not just personal but symbolic, a case study in how power operates within closed systems and how women, in particular, are often left carrying the weight of appearances at the cost of their own freedom. As news of JANA's return to her father's house spreads, the reactions are predictably divided. Some fans express sympathy, praising her courage to walk away from a toxic dynamic. Others criticize her, questioning why she would return to the very household that limited her for so long. But perhaps the most telling reaction comes from within the family itself. Reports suggest that while Michelle expressed quiet support, Jim Bob viewed JANA's decision with both concern and calculation. For him, it was not only about his daughter's well-being, but about the public image of the Duggar brand. A daughter returning home, pregnant and separated from her husband, disrupts the carefully crafted illusion of perfect order. And yet, even as the family attempts to manage the narrative, the truth cannot be hidden. JANA is no longer the silent observer. She has found her voice, and she is willing to use it. The coming months will reveal whether JANA's decision leads to lasting change, or whether she will once again be drawn back into the cycles of manipulation and control that have defined so much of her life. But one thing is clear: her journey is not just about her marriage to Stephen, nor about her return to her father's home. It is about the universal struggle between autonomy and expectation, between truth and facade, between the desire to be free and the weight of loyalty to family and faith. JANA Duggar's emotional journey, marked by betrayal, resilience, and defiance, is a story that resonates far beyond the walls of her father's house. It forces all who hear it to confront uncomfortable questions about power, about love, and about what it truly means to find freedom. And as this story continues to unfold, one cannot help but wonder, is this the breaking point that will finally shatter the illusion of perfection surrounding the Duggar family? Or is it merely another chapter in a saga of control and survival? One that will leave Jana once again fighting for the freedom she has long deserved but never fully known.